Welcome, everybody who's here, everybody online, and thank you, everybody, for coming here. This is a great opportunity. This is, as we said, Tech Field Day is an amazing event. We've had opportunities to be a part of this in different ways before, and I'm particularly glad to be here today. So my name is Eric Wright. I'm at Disco Posse on Twitter. That's usually the way I get introduced. But I'm going to tell you a quick little story about why it's different today. That's because at Virtualization Field Day 3 in Silicon Valley, I had an opportunity to meet a great company called VMTurbo. Now, we didn't know then, when we met, that it would turn into a relationship. But luckily, through the course of last year and through a lot of work that happened, and a lot of work with you, all the different people in the community, and a lot of interesting things that happened with blogging and whatnot, I was lucky enough in the fourth quarter of 2014 to be able to take on the role of Principal Solutions Engineer and Technology Evangelist. I know it's a long title, don't ask, at VMTurbo. So I'm very proud to be able to do that. And what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about something very interesting. It's demand-driven control for the software-defined universe. There's a very specific way that we talk about this because we see a lot of products out there. We see a lot of ways that we're doing things already today or for years. And what's interesting about what we're trying to do here at VMTurbo and in general in the industry is we're changing the way that we look at things and the way that we handle things with understanding what demand is. So when we talk about demand-driven control, you're going to see a lot of these phrases come up. It's around demand, control. You're going to see stuff where we talk about disruption. Disruption is stuff that's happening everywhere. It's happening in the industry. And we're seeing changes in technology. We're seeing new technologies come in that are, we talk about unseating the incumbents, but it doesn't necessarily unseat them. It does, however, cut into their market share significantly. So what's interesting is more and more companies are coming in and disrupting the way that things are happening. And that's affecting us in operating our data centers and as customers and as service deliverers and as vendors who are creating products to be able to help to work with all of those tools. So when we talk about things like disruption, problems with disruption is that it can often introduce new tools to do same old things. That's the wrong way to deal with it. When we talk about cloud is a methodology. It's not a technology, right? It's the way that we do it. And that's why VMTurbo, it's very important that we're going to talk about the way we do it and more importantly, why we do it. Now, we remember seeing things like this. This is not control. At the time when we saw things like this classic old, telecom systems, Klondike 555, we knew that this was the best control that was available at the time when operating in this kind of an infrastructure. We've come a long way since then. Some companies haven't come as far as others, but ultimately, the telecom industry has changed at incredible pace and with incredible velocity. At the same time, it also seems glacial in the level of change sometimes, but it does happen. And we're seeing changes in networking where we've accepted that this is no longer the way that we should be doing things. Some people still they like to touch things and turn knobs and do all that good stuff, and we hear this all the time with software-defined this and software-defined that, which is why we talk about demand-driven control for the software-defined universe. As more and more things become software-defined or software manageable, they lack control. When we look at things at VMTurbo, one of the things that we're very, very consistent on is the way that we view things. And we look at all of these different ecosystems that happen in technology. We view this simply in a traditional economic model. I'm not going to go too much into it because I've got an expert team that's really good at explaining that part of the story. But the fundamentals of economics have been around for decades, much longer. And ultimately, the same principles, when we they apply in technology. And this is what VMTurbo is doing and why it's different than things that you've seen before. So when we look at supply, we look at the way that we deliver services, we deliver products, these are fundamental bits of technology. So this is going to be supply and storage, compute, network, converged fabric like UCS. And we look on that top part of the curve, which is about demand. That's why we talk about demand-driven control. Control for the sake of control is valueless unless you're doing it for the purposes of the demand that's being required. And this is why it's a very careful way that we balance this out. So you're going to see a lot about, again, demand, control, the economic models that we use in order to derive this information. And I know Justin he's got a lot of good questions around that one. And hopefully we get a chance, we definitely want, people to ask questions here. I'm going to step away and I'm going to let my guys do the really cool stuff. And I'm going to sit in the back and I'm going to monitor Twitter to make sure you all don't ask some nasty questions and don't give us a chance to answer. But when we see some of the new things, we talked about disruptors. There's a lot of disruptors that are playing in these different spaces. We see containers on there, and I'm very sad that I wasn't the first one that got to say container at Tech Field Day, because unfortunately Platform 9 beat us to it. But kudos to Platform 9. They're a great organization. They've got a great tool. We're very excited about what they're doing. So when we look at containers to us are demand. They're something that is going to need to consume services that we have in our data center. And that's why we understand how it plays amongst all of this. We're going to talk about something that's kind of close to my heart. Sorry, I just smashed into the microphone there. It was a bad guy. And that's OpenStack. As you know, a couple of years ago, I started dabbling in some OpenStack stuff, and people said, "You're in your crazy hobbies." And then about a year ago, they said, "Crazy hobby? So you're still doing it?" And then, another year later, and people are going, "Hey, can you show me how to do that crazy hobby?" Because it looks like it's starting to become a disruptive change in the way that people are consuming services. So that's, again, this all sort of is around the fundamentals of what we do at VMTurbo. And I'm lucky because I get to simply help and tell the story. But the story is best told by folks that actually built this and help deal with every day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over now to my team, and we're going to talk about what is control.